They believe you all conspired with them to kill your ex-husband. You understand that, right?
I understand that is what they believe.
Wendi Adelson has never been charged in connection with the 2014 murder of her ex-husband, Professor Dan Markel. However, since the 2019 trial against defendants Katherine Magbanua and Sigfredo Garcia, who were charged with the murder along with Rivera, Wendi Adelson found herself under the unforgiving glare of the media spotlight. This is because during that trial, the first of 3 so far, with more expected, the prosecutors called Wendi as a witness, and then introduced evidence to suggest that Wendi Adelson was involved in the murder and had lied on the witness stand. Indeed, years later, prosecutors did file a document where they call Wendi Adelson an unindicted co-conspirator. Some would argue that Wendi has been in the media spotlight as a strong suspect for involvement in the murder since 2016, when a probable cause affidavit revealing many of the crazy details of the murder plot to kill Dan Markel was supposedly leaked to the media. In the second trial, in 2022, the retrial of the case against Katherine Magbanua, Wendi Adelson endured a fiery cross-examination by defense attorney Christopher DeCoste. So now let's jump to 2023 and the high-stakes murder trial against her brother, Charles Adelson, who was accused of ordering the hit on Wendi's ex-husband, Professor Dan Markel. Prosecutors again call Wendi Adelson as a witness for the state. This time, however, she was going to be cross-examined by her brother's defense attorney, Dan Rashbaum. Those following the trial closely were looking forward to this cross-examination. Would Dan Rashbaum suggest Wendi herself ordered the hit and not her brother Charlie? Would Dan Rashbaum come hard on Wendi, or would he go soft on Wendi? Let's check it out, and you will hear Mentor Lawyer's take after we watch the cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Adelson, we've met before, right?
Yes,
We've met 2 or 3 times in our life, right?
that's correct.
We initially met in 2016 after the arrests of the killers in this case.
That's correct.
During that meeting, we had no conversation whatsoever about the substance of this case, right?
That's correct.
We met again in April of 2022 on the day that your brother was arrested, correct?
Correct.
You were at your parents' house and we were figuring out where he was, right?
That's right.
Again, nothing was discussed about the case other than his arrest.
Correct.
In fact, before right now, we have never discussed your testimony at all.
Correct.
Okay. With that in mind, let me ask you the most important question. You're aware that the state has named you as an unindicted co-conspirator in the murder of your ex-husband, right?
Correct.
They believe that you, along with your brother, along with your mom, along with your dad, conspired with those 3 killers, including Katie Magbanua. They believe you all conspired with them to kill your ex-husband. You understand that, right?
I understand that is what they believe.
You understand they put up a chart in their opening with pictures of all of you.
Yes, I saw the chart.
Ms. Adelson, did you have anything to do with the murder of your brother, of your ex-husband?
Absolutely not.
It's fair to say the state has it wrong.
Absolutely.
Were you in a conspiracy with any members of your family to kill Professor Markel?
No.
Okay, with that starting point, let's get into your background a little bit. I'm going to try to skip through stuff that's already been done. Growing up, you were pretty close with your parents?
Yes.
Fair to say they were middle class?
Yes,
You went to a public high school?
I did.
You did pretty well in high school, right?
I was valedictorian.
But around a year or 2 before you went to college, your father was a victim of a Ponzi scheme, correct?
It was actually when I was in 8th grade.
And he lost much of his wealth?
He lost his whole life savings.
You still went to a prestigious college up in Boston, right?
I got a full scholarship.
And then when it came time to go to law school, did you pay for law school?
I got a full scholarship.
Now, you got asked a lot of questions about divorce law in your direct examination. Are you a divorce lawyer?
I am not.
What type of law did you specialize in?
Immigration.
All those filings, and we'll get to them. Did you write those filings?
No.
So the words that Ms. Kappelman were reading, they were for you. You reviewed them, correct?
I did.
Did you draft them?
I didn't draft any pleadings.
That motion for contempt, she asked you if he could be put in jail. You have no idea, right?
I didn't remember whether that's what contempt meant, but
You were just seeking the court to enforce its previous order, right?
that's correct.
Now remember you said that during these filings, this is the same exhibit, that you thought you talked about some other things and Ms. Kappelman said, nah, it's not in there. Remember that?
I do.
I'm gonna, can I borrow that binder? This is it. I'm going to draw your attention, this is State's Exhibit 56. I'm going to draw your attention to page 187. And I want you to read this paragraph for the jury.
Okay. The wife has been very unhappy in the marriage and filed her petition for dissolution of marriage in August 2012. The husband continues to characterize this as an abandonment of the family. At no time has the wife abandoned the children. She is divorcing the husband due to her unhappiness with him and the marriage, and she only moved out of the home because she knew the husband would not. The husband's statement of abandonment are unfounded and not supported by fact or law. He is simply having difficulty accepting her decision. In fact, he is having so much difficulty that he has told several of her colleagues and friends that she must have mental health issues.
You can stop there.
Okay.
Do you remember telling Ms. Kappelman that you remember filing something like that?
Yes, I do.
You can set it aside. We're going to
Okay.
move on. When did you meet Professor Markel?
We met in Washington, D.C. in the fall of 2004 when I went up to D.C. to interview for a job.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Miami.
When did the relationship get serious?
Well, because it was long distance, it kind of got serious pretty quickly because it's a commitment to date someone long distance. So we started dating, and then I think over Thanksgiving, he came and spent Thanksgiving with my family, and by then it felt pretty serious.
Do you recall if you introduced him to Charlie?
I would have at that point. I don't remember introducing him before that time, but he would have met my whole family then.
What did Charlie think of Professor Markel?
I honestly don't remember his reaction, but
Were they buddies?
no,
They really had nothing in common, right?
no, they had nothing in common.
Now, you got engaged pretty quickly. Is that fair to say?
We did, yep.
And I think you described how you ended up in Tallahassee, how you did your last year of law school in Tallahassee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you had 2 children.
We did.
During the marriage, did Professor Markel get along with your parents?
Yeah.
Now, skipping a little bit ahead, and then we'll go back. Do you remember asking Ms. Kappelman asking you about your parents not liking Tallahassee and not having access to the kids in Tallahassee? Do you recall those questions?
I don't remember her asking whether my parents didn't like Tallahassee, but I remember her asking about access, like not having unfettered access to the kids.
And do you remember talking about how your parents were looking for real estate in Tallahassee?
Yeah, my parents were trying to buy a house here.
Do you recall that after you got divorced, they contacted a real estate agent named Tim Kelly to buy that house?
Yes.
During the course of your marriage, I think you said you were close to your brother, Charlie.
Yes.
How often did you speak to each other?
Maybe once a week or a couple times here and there.
Now, in all the years you lived in Tallahassee, is it fair to say that Charlie only came up 2 or 3 times?
Yeah, he came up for the birth of both boys, so definitely twice. And then I think he had an internship or a job in Alabama for a little while, so he came by then. But so maybe 3 times.
Now, you described that there came a time when you and Professor Markel started to have some marital issues.
That's right.
And some of these issues had to do with religion, correct?
Yes.
And some of them had to do with just the fact that you two were growing apart. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
But you got marriage counseling, right?
We did.
How long were you in marriage counseling for?
I think about 6 months, maybe.
Now, as close as you are with your mom, while in marriage counseling, did you tell her you were in marriage counseling?
I don't remember telling her I was in marriage counseling.
And until the end, did Charlie know that you were in marriage counseling?
I don't know if I talked to my family about being in counseling.
Do you recall a time when you and Charlie, you were down in South Florida and you told him that you were having marital problems?
I do.
And what was Charlie's reaction to that?
I mean, he was supportive of me. I remember him saying, life is short, so if you're unhappy, then, you can make a different choice.
Do you recall a dinner at the Melting Pot where you told Charlie that you had decided to file for divorce?
I do.
And when you told Charlie that you were going to file for divorce, did he have anger and hatred towards Professor Markel?
No.
Was he sad because he knew that this was going to affect his nephews?
I don't think he was really sad. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people wondered why I got married to Danny in the first place, and my friends were very supportive when I decided to end the marriage.
Now, you actually filed for divorce in September of 2012, is that right?
That sounds right.
And when you filed for divorce, let me say this. When you left the home, I think that was discussed in the direct, Professor Markel was out of town, right?
He was. I called him and let him know that I had filed.
You're a non-confrontational person, right?
Which is not my best quality, yes.
But you had been in marriage counseling for quite some time before you left the home, right?
Yes.
Before you left the home, did you have a place to live?
I did.
So there was some planning, correct?
Yes.
Charlie had nothing to do with those arrangements, right?
No.
And that's when you moved into the Aqua Ridge house?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 1 for identification purposes only. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you recognize the email addresses on this document?
I do.
Is that your email address in July of 2012?
It was my work email address, so that makes sense. That must have been my email.
Does this look like an email that you could have received from your mom?
It does. I don't remember this email, but it does look like an email I could have received.
Judge, I would move this into evidence as Defense Exhibit 1 at this time.
Is there an objection?
Objection, hearsay.
Approach. Please bring the exhibit with you.
This is an email between your mom and you in July of 2012, right?
Yes.
And just pointing to just under paragraph 2, I just need to know that I can legally take my children and move to another location. There was concern that you wanted to make sure that you weren't breaking the law, right?
Correct.
What can I legally remove from the house to the new location? There was concern that you wanted to do everything within the law, right?
Correct.
Now, we've heard a lot about this TV already, so let's just clear this up right now. Charlie bought you the TV, right?
Yes.
More precisely, Charlie had your parents buy the TV and he paid them back.
Yes.
And they bought the TV from Best Buy, right?
Yes.
Have you ever bought anything from Best Buy?
I'm sure I have.
When you buy from Best Buy, they always try you to get the Geek Squad warranty, right?
Yeah, they do.
And people like me always fall for that, right? But when you call and you need a repair on the TV, it's got to be registered to your name, right?
I think so.
Do you know if the Geek Squad was registered to your mom and dad?
I don't know offhand, but if they're the ones who bought the TV, then they probably bought the, Geek Squad policy that went with it too.
If I showed you the receipt, would that refresh your recollection?
I don't really have an independent recollection, so I don't think so.
We'll come back to that. Now, Charlie made that joke many times, right?
He did.
He never told you he actually looked into hiring a hitman, right?
No.
Did you think he was serious?
No.
By the way, the state has you as a co-conspirator with Charlie Adelson, right?
I believe so.
But they also have you, according to them, blurting out during an interview that your alleged co-conspirator did the murder. Does that make any sense?
I don't understand the
Let
question.
me rephrase. They have you guys as co-conspirators. They think you did a murder together, right?
I think so. That's what they believe.
If you did a murder together, why would you have blurted out a statement like that?
I clearly would not.
Argumentative.
Sustained.
Do you know if Charlie repeated that joke in March of 2014 when you went to Yardbirds with Jeff Lacasse?
He may have, if I was mentioning the TV was broken or something like that.
Do you know who else was at that dinner?
Katie.
During your divorce, you spoke to your mom daily, probably, right?
I would usually call my parents on my way to drop kids at school. We'd have a short conversation, so that sounds right.
And it's fair to say that your parents were involved in some of the decisions that you were making in the divorce. You were asking their advice.
For some of the time.
Did you often speak with Charlie about what was happening in the divorce?
Not too much, no.
But fair to say Charlie was supportive of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was always supportive of me.
Is Charlie kind of self-centered?
I don't think so.
At the time of your divorce, though, he had a lot going on in his life.
I mean, his life was going great. He had a great business. He always had lots of girls. He had friends.
The divorce was settled in July of 2013.
Correct.
How did you feel after it was settled?
I felt better. I felt a sense of relief that we could just move on with our lives.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about this relocation issue.
Okay.
Isn't it true that your attorney told you that there was very little chance for you to win that motion?
I believe so, yes.
Where were you working in Tallahassee? Let's go backwards, actually. In 2007, when you were married, where were you working in Tallahassee?
At that time, I would have been working at the FSU Center for Human Rights.
And you were lobbying for anti-human trafficking legislation?
I was primarily representing victims of human trafficking, but I did a little bit of lobbying too.
But the funding for your job ran out and you lost your job, right?
Yeah.
Okay. At the time of the divorce, you had gotten a job at FSU. What was that job?
At the time of the divorce, I was adjunct teaching a few classes at the law school, and I had a number of different jobs at FSU, but by that point I was probably running something called a medical legal partnership, where I would work with the law school, the medical school, and the social work school to help the students work together to try to help solve legal problems that clients had.
Did you like that job?
I did, yeah.
So if you liked the job so much, why were you looking to relocate?
I mean, relocation was not a big issue for me. I probably never would have thought of it. A friend suggested it to me that it might be helpful. Maybe I would get more time with the kids if I could relocate. But I wasn't really focused on it. I didn't think it would happen, and I was pretty happy being at my job.
Now, you were a non-tenured clinical professor in that job, right?
That's right.
It meant that you could lose the job at any time. Is that fair
Sure.
to say?
Mm-hmm.
And you had a lot of responsibilities, now being divorced, even more responsibilities with the kids.
Sure.
And you were offered a job at a prestigious law firm in Miami. Is that fair to say?
I was, yes.
And that job was going to have a pretty big salary increase.
Yes.
And it was going to give you an opportunity for more stability. Fair enough?
Yeah.
You were also going to have the benefit of family
Sure.
in South Florida who could help you with the kids, right?
Yeah.
Now, even with this relocation request, was it ever your intention for Professor Markel to be absent from your boy's life?
Never, no.
Okay. When you lost the relocation motion, I think it's fair to say that your mom and dad were pretty upset.
That's right.
It's fair to say that your mom came up with some crazy ideas.
Totally bonkers, yes.
We saw the email about conversion of the kids, right?
Yes.
By the way, did you ever do any of that?
No. No.
So you never dressed the kids up, you never baptized them, you never took a picture of them?
No.
Okay. Did your mom keep bugging you to do any of that stuff?
No, I think it was just one crazy email.
By the way, in all of these emails, did your mom ever tell you to do something violent
No.
to Professor Markel?
No.
Was there ever any discussion of threats of violence in any way?
No, never.
Mr. Rashbaum, I'm going to permit you to ask one more question, and from there, we're going to go into recess for the evening, but your examination of the witness will go into tomorrow.
Have you ever heard of the Prof's blog?
Sure.
Remember those questions that Ms. Kappelman asked you about how people could know about Danny traveling on the weekend of his murder? Remember those questions?
I do, yes.
Would it surprise? What is the Prof's blog?
It was a blog that Danny started with some friends to talk about the law and legal theories and to kind of have conversations in space with other law professors.
I'm showing you it's marked as Defense Exhibit 2. And this will be quick, Your Honor. I promise.
I was going to say, we went from 1 to 5 real quick.
It'll be quick.
Please show your exhibit for the witness.
Does this look like a posting from the Prof's blog?
It does, yes.
Judge, I admit Defense Exhibit 2 into evidence at this point in time.
Any objections of the state?
I'd like to take a look at it first, Your Honor.
Oh, here you go.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Go ahead. You don't have to approach. We're going to handle this without the jurors.
I'll ask it one last question, and then we can, if you would, we can handle.
One means one, not five.
One means one. Do you know if Professor Markel would frequently post his travel schedule on his Prof's blog?
He would post it on his Prof's blog and on his Facebook.
That's my one question, Your Honor.
All right. Members of the jury, we are going to go into recess for this evening. The examination of Ms. Adelson will continue in the morning. The instruction that you've received from the beginning of jury selection and throughout, I'm going to repeat it once again because it is important. Do not discuss this case with anyone else or each other. Do not look at any news reports. Do not seek out any information about this matter. You are to report at the same time that you were today, 8:30, and we will get started by 8:45, assuming everyone is on time. Also, when we come out of these breaks, because you have to move as a group, if you can go to the restroom as expeditiously as possible, it will not hold up moving on. All right. Have a good night.
Leave your notepads face down on your chairs.
Anybody that needs to come.
Everyone can be seated. How are the jurors doing with the potty situation?
Significantly better than they have.
We'd like to hear.
I think they should just be already.
Right, is Miss Adelson present?
Yeah, I saw it.
Right, if someone can bring her in so she can take the witness box.
Judge, would you like me at the podium now, or?
You can wait. For everyone in the gallery, once again, if you were not present yesterday, so you understand the instruction, once the testimony has begun, if you leave the courtroom, you will not be readmitted until the witness completes their testimony. Please also silence your phones.
Judge, may we approach before we get started?
Yes. Morning. You won't have to be sworn again. You remain under oath. Let's bring in the jurors. Everyone can be seated. Good morning, members of the jury.
Good morning.
We are going to resume with the cross-examination of Ms. Adelson at this time. Mr. Rashbaum, you may examine when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I want to go back to your staying in Tallahassee after the relocation motion was denied, okay? You understood that you couldn't leave Tallahassee after it was denied, right?
That's right.
And so you decided to build a life here with your boys, right?
I mean, I had been building a life here for 7 years before that, but to continue with my life, yes.
You had a large circle of friends.
I did, yeah.
You were in a book club.
I was.
In fact, on July 1, 2014, just 17 days before the murder that the state thinks you participated in, do you recall that you were excited that a friend of yours was moving to Tallahassee?
I do.
Do you remember that friend's name? I can refresh your memory if you need it.
Well, I think Renee Griggs was planning on moving to Tallahassee.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you for identification purposes only, Defense Exhibit 3. Is that your email?
Yes, that's my email.
And is that your email with Ms. Griggs?
Yes, it is.
Judge, I'd offer into evidence right now, Defense Exhibit 3.
Any objection from the state?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
What is the exception that you're offering us on?
State of mind.
Please provide it to the court. The objection is sustained, however, the witness may testify here to her memory concerning this issue.
You learned on July 1 that your friend Ms. Griggs was moving to Tallahassee, right?
Well, I learned she was interviewing for a job in Tallahassee.
And you thought that was a dream come true, right?
I was really excited about it.
Why was it a dream come true?
To be able to be with her all the time would be fantastic.
You were dating men that lived in Tallahassee, right?
I was.
One of those men was Jeff Lacasse.
That's right.
We'll talk about him a little more later, but you dated him the end of 2013 through June, July 2014?
That's right.
And after you broke up with him, do you recall joining a couple date sites,
I did.
websites? I don't think they're called date sites, but dating websites.
Yes,
Do you recall setting up dates for the week or so after July 18th?
I did.
And do you recall having emails with individuals setting up those dates?
I do.
Do you recall setting up those dates on July 16th, 2014 for 2 weeks later?
That sounds right.
Do you recall setting up dates on July 17th for around 2 weeks later?
That sounds right.
Now, yesterday, Ms. Kappelman talked about a house you did not buy in 2013. You recall that testimony?
I do.
Let's now talk about 2014. In the spring and summer of 2014, you were working with a local realtor to buy a house in Tallahassee, right?
I was.
I'm showing you what's marked as Defense Exhibits 6 and 7. And approach your hand. Do you recall in April of 2014 looking at a property on Baird Street?
I do.
Do you recall in June of 2014 looking at 40 open houses that are available in Tallahassee?
I do.
Judge, I would move these exhibits into evidence as well.
Well,
Hearsay, Your Honor.
let me look at the exhibits. With the exception you're offering them under once again.
State of mind, rehabilitation.
Exhibit 6 will be admitted. Exhibit 7, I believe. Is this all of Exhibit 7, or is this 7 and 8?
It's all exhibit.
6 is admitted, 7 is not. The objection is sustained as to 7.
May I publish, Your Honor?
You may.
Do not this thing on. Is there something? All right.
Oh, that's not.
Oh, that's not technology. It is not.
Here.
I don't want to touch pages. Okay. Was J. Depart Frog Realty your broker?
He was a different realtor I was using. I used a couple different people, but I heard he was good, so I had reached out to him about this particular property.
Okay. And that was in April 25th, 2014.
That's right.
And that's about, I think, 4 weeks before the first attempted murder in June, correct?
I don't know about the first attempted murder.
And if you weren't able to buy, you were going to rent, right?
I would have continued renting.
Do you recall speaking to a Leslie Andrews on July 7th about a rental?
I don't remember Leslie Andrews, but it's on, I mean, I had a main real estate person I worked with, so she would have been maybe someone who had a property I was interested in, but I don't remember.
Do you remember something called the Tallahassee Center?
I don't.
Judge, may I approach with Defense Exhibit 8 for identification purposes only?
You may.
And see if this refreshes your recollection that you were looking to rent a one-bedroom lease, and this is from July. This email is from July 7th, 2014.
But you said I was looking to rent a one-bedroom, and she offers me a one-bedroom, but I say I need something bigger, right? So that doesn't work.
Nonetheless, you were looking to rent. You were in the rental market just 11 days before the murder occurred, right?
That's right.
In July of 2014, you planned for the boys to attend school in Tallahassee in the fall, right?
We were trying to figure out which school our older son would go to, and our younger son probably would have kept going to the same preschool.
In fact, you and Professor Markel were arguing about that, right?
We hadn't come to a decision yet, but
You wanted the boys to go to, I think they call it SAS.
we had put our older son in the lottery, and he got pulled for it, and so we were exploring it as an option.
And that was the lottery for the school year 2014 and 2015.
Right.
So you didn't expect him to go to school in Miami.
No.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Now, in early 2013, you were appointed a clinical professor by the FSU faculty,
That's right.
and you were continuing to handle immigration and disability cases around Tallahassee,
That's right.
and you had plans to teach at the law school in the fall of 2014?
Yes.
Fall of 2014 meaning after the murder, after when your ex-husband was murdered, correct? You were talking to research assistants about working with you, right?
Yes.
Do you recall speaking to a research assistant about working for you possibly in the fall of 2014?
Sure, that sounds right.
Do you recall Z. Nolan?
I do.
And you offered them a job in the summer and they couldn't take it? And you said, well, come back to me in the fall. Do you recall that?
I do.
And in the spring of 2014, well, let me back up. You authored a book, correct?
I did.
In the spring of 2014, your book was selected by FSU for what was called the One Book, One Campus event, right?
That's right.
That means that your book was going to be required reading for all incoming freshmen at FSU.
That's right.
And that means that we're talking about the incoming freshmen after the summer of 2014, right?
I was supposed to speak at Convocation in August.
Let's talk about that in a second. But before we get there, that was a big honor for you, right?
It was the highlight of my career.
And you were very excited about it.
I was super excited.
You were going to be the keynote speaker at the FSU Convocation on August 24th, 2014, correct?
That's right.
You told your friends and family about it.
I did. I probably told everyone.
You told your parents about it for sure.
I did.
And you told Charlie about it.
I'm sure I did, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to show you Defense Exhibit 12 and 13. Take a look at these and let me know if you recognize them. Let me know if it's your email.
This is my email.
You recognize these items?
I do.
Judge, I move Defense Exhibit 12 and 13 into evidence.
Any objection?
May I see these items, please?
Sure. You have them.
Hearsay and relevance, Your Honor.
May I approach Your Honor? State of mind. Rehabilitation.
Sustained on grounds of relevance.
Judge, may we go sidebar, please?
Okay.
Go ahead. Judge, the state's whole theory of this case is that my client did this so that his sister could relocate. These are emails that show that my client was planning on attending an event in Tallahassee in August 2014, that she was excited about that event, that none of these alleged co-conspirators had any idea that she was going to be relocating, that they were excited to be here for this event. It goes to the heart of showing how their case doesn't make any sense.
May I see the exhibit again?
And she has testified as to such. I'll agree it shows her state of mind at the time, but ultimately the relevance of this being, now that she has confirmed this through her testimony, why is this relevant still? Because it shows that her mother, her father, and her brother were going to come to Tallahassee in August of 2014 to watch her. Right. As to that point, you certainly can question her as to her memory on the documents and convocation and speaking about the book, but she's given her direct testimony. This becomes cumulative rather than she can't recall it or she doesn't know her state of mind at the time. Okay, I'll just ask the question then. Go ahead.
Do you recall that your parents and Charlie were quite excited to come watch you in Tallahassee at this event in August?
Yes.
Do you recall your brother saying he couldn't wait to book a ticket, that it was fucking awesome?
Yeah. He was very excited.
Do you recall discussing with Professor Markel who would have custody of the boys during various trips in August and September of 2014?
Yes.
Do you recall having those discussions in July of 2014?
That would make sense, yeah.
Do you recall scheduling a whole host of meetings after July 18th, 2014?
Yes.
Let me be more precise. Before July 18, 2014, do you recall scheduling a bunch of meetings that were to occur after July 18, 2014 in Tallahassee?
Yes.
Do you recall making plans with a friend moving to Tallahassee for July 25th, 2014?
I don't.
Let me see if I can refresh your memory. Do Do you know an individual named Tahira Lee?
I do.
May I approach Your Honor with Defense Exhibit 15? And I would direct you to the email on June 17th, 2014, which I think is the fourth email on the first page, and see if that refreshes your memory. But feel free to look at the whole document.
I see it, but you were asking if they were moving to Tallahassee on the 25th, or if I...
No.
No.
Read
Did
to
you,
yourself, Ms. Adelson, don't read aloud.
Okay, sorry.
I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
Do you recall making plans with her where you said you would make plans with her after August 25th, 2014, because your family was coming to town?
Yes.
And that happened, that correspondence was in late June of 2014?
Yes.
Do you recall in June, you can put that aside now.
Okay.
Do you recall in June of 2014, late June of 2014, expressing interest in joining the board of a Tallahassee-based child advocacy nonprofit called American Children's Campaign?
I do.
That was in Tallahassee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall scheduling a meeting for July 23rd, 2014, with a Professor Van Dern with the FSU College of Medicine?
So I don't, but I ran a medical legal partnership, so I would have been setting up meetings with the medical school, with the law school, with the social work school, so that would have been normal, but I don't remember it specifically.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Does this refresh your recollection that you were scheduling a meeting with Professor Van Dern for July 23rd of 2014?
Yes.
Do you recall you can put that aside.
Okay.
Do you recall scheduling a meeting with your divorce lawyer to meet any time of the week of July 21, 2014?
Again, I don't remember specifically, but it sounds like it would have made sense for the time.
Do you know an individual named Cindy Jean?
I do.
Do you remember emailing her and asking her if the kids were available to go swimming at the pool on July 19th to 20th?
I don't remember, but it sounds like something I would have asked.
May I approach, Your Honor, with Defense Exhibit 20 for identification purposes only?
You may.
Does this refresh your memory about trying to set up that play date for July 20th or July 19th with Ms. Jean?
Yes.
You can put that aside. Do you recall that your mom planned to visit Tallahassee in November of 2014?
I don't remember that.
I'm showing, may I approach, Your Honor, with Defense Exhibit 21 for identification purposes only?
You may.
Please take a look at this.
Yes.
Does this refresh your memory that your parents planned on being in Tallahassee on November 17th. Does that
Yes.
refresh your memory? You can put that aside. Do you recall asking your parents to come to Tallahassee on August 1, 2014 for a birthday party with Ben, for Ben?
I don't remember doing that, but that sounds, it's close in time to his birthday.
May I approach your honor with Defense Exhibit 22?
You may.
Does this refresh your recollection that you were going to have a birthday party for Ben in Tallahassee in early August of 2014?
That's right.
You can put that aside. And that your parents were going to come up for that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall making flight reservations to travel to Newark and then back to Tallahassee? So you're going to leave from Tallahassee and go to Newark, come back to Tallahassee for a wedding in October 2014.
I do.
And you made those reservations in July of 2014. Do you recall that?
I don't recall when I made the reservation, but I remember the wedding.
May I approach your honor with Defense Exhibit 23?
You may.
Does this refresh your recollection that the reservation was made sometime around July 14th, 2014?
Yes.
That you were booking tickets for a wedding in New Jersey on October 24th, 2014?
Yes.
And the cost of those tickets were over $400, right?
That's right.
You put that aside. Those tickets weren't to go back to Miami, were they?
No, it was Tallahassee to Newark, Newark to Tallahassee.
Why did you make those tickets to go back to Tallahassee?
That is where I lived.
We're going to move on to another subject. Ms. Kappelman talked a little bit yesterday about the litigation that occurred after the relocation litigation with Professor Markel. You recall that?
I do.
And there were these pieces of litigation back and forth about money and about filing false affidavits. You remember those?
Yes.
It was what was called the motion against your mom that Professor Markel filed. You recall that, right?
I do.
Okay. With regards to the motion that Professor Markel filed claiming that you and your attorney filed a false affidavit, did you get the sense that you were going to prevail on that litigation?
Yes.
Was the judge getting frustrated with Professor Markel on that litigation?
Very.
Did the judge admonish Professor Markel regarding that litigation?
The judge said he needed to stop.
Were you concerned about getting disbarred?
No.
I want to talk a little bit about Jeff Lacasse. You first met Mr. Lacasse in the fall of 2013.
Yes.
It was casual at first.
It was.
You were dating other people as well.
I was.
It got more serious around March of 2014.
That's right.
Fair to say he was in love with you?
I don't really remember. I don't think I could say, but it was more serious.
Okay. You weren't so sure about him. Is that fair to say?
I think my feelings developed over time,
And then they undeveloped?
and then they undeveloped.
You were very different people from very different backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
He didn't spend much time with your parents, right?
I think maybe he met them once.
He wanted to meet them more than once, right? He didn't like that he didn't get to see them more times.
I think he wanted to be more integrated into my life.
Jeff Lacasse met Charlie Adelson one time in March of 2014, right?
That's right.
He accompanied you on a trip with law students, right?
I used to run an alternative spring break, and he came with me.
And you decided to come down to South Florida for a day or two, right?
That's right.
And you had dinner at a place called Yardbird, right?
That's right.
Are you aware that that happened on March 11th, 2014?
No, I don't remember the date, just that it was during the spring break.
Fair enough. You remember sitting outside on the patio?
I do.
And it was you and Mr. Lacasse and Charlie and a woman named Katherine Magbanua. Do you recall that?
That's right.
Who was Charlie's girlfriend at the time.
Yes.
Are you aware that Sigfredo Garcia was watching you at that dinner?
No.
Are you aware that he was contemplating running your brother over with his car at that dinner?
No.
After dinner, you and Jeff Lacasse stayed at Charlie's house, right?
We did.
Miss Magbanua wasn't there, right?
I don't remember her being there.
It was just the three of you.
I think so.
And you left the next morning.
We did.
Now, you and Mr. Lacasse started having issues around May of 2014. Is that fair to say?
That sounds about right.
You started to become nervous around him?
I don't really remember if I was nervous around him, but I started thinking it wasn't the right relationship.
He started accusing you of being unfaithful, right?
He did.
He accused you of having an affair with someone that you had previously dated?
He did.
Excuse me. You told him that you didn't. You denied it.
That's right.
And he didn't believe you.
He did not.
And before this individual that you used to date, you had coffee with at a place called All Saints in Tallahassee, right?
I did.
And Mr. Lacasse saw you having coffee with this individual, right?
He did.
And that caused a confrontation. Is that fair to say?
He flew into a rage.
Subsequently, he went through your phone and planner, right?
He did.
And this is around May, June of 2014.
That sounds right.
And you and Mr. Lacasse went to Gainesville for a weekend for his work at some point around this time frame.
Yes.
And that Saturday night, June 28th, he basically exploded at you.
He did.
He yelled at you for hours.
He did.
He accused you of having affairs with multiple people.
He did.
You were very upset, to say the least.
I was devastated. Yep.
Now, you were scheduled to leave for South Florida, I believe it was on June 30th or June 29th to celebrate your dad's 70th birthday, right?
That sounds right.
And Mr. Lacasse wasn't invited.
No.
You went down to South Florida on June 30th, and you and the boys stayed with your parents, right?
We did.
You had the boys with you the whole time.
Yes.
Dan Markel didn't have the boys at that point in time. The boys were with you.
Yes.
And Charlie knew that, right?
Yes, he was with us.
Your mom planned a big party for the birthday.
She did.
Now, I think when Miss Kappelman asked you if the birthday fell on a Saturday, you weren't sure.
I remembered it being on his actual birthday, which I thought was a Saturday, but I don't remember the calendar from 2014.
May I approach Your Honor with Defendant's Exhibit 25? Ms. Adelson, does this refresh your recollection that July 5th, 2014 was on a Saturday?
Yes.
And that the party was at 7:30 p.m. or
Yes.
thereabouts?
Mhm.
Put that aside. Now, when you got back to Tallahassee, you saw Mr. Lacasse on July 13th,
That sounds right.
and when you saw him, it was not a good meeting. Is that fair to say? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You saw him the next day at a yoga studio,
I went to yoga and he wanted to come.
and it was awkward
It was.
and kind of tense.
It was.
And he asked to see you again later that week,
He did.
and you didn't want to.
I did not.
And when you got home that night, you sent him an email asking him not to contact you for at least 7 days, that you wanted to think things over. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You never saw him again, right?
No?
Are you now aware that there was a first attempt on your ex-husband's life on June 4th and June 4th, 5th of 2014?
Yes.
When you lived with Professor Markel on Trescott, was your address publicly listed?
I believe so.
May I have one moment, Your Honor? Judge, at this point in time, we'd ask a stipulation be read into evidence.
Which stipulation?
The stipulation regarding the drop-off pickup schedule for the Markel children.
Very well.
Do you need a copy, Your Honor?
I have it right here. I'm just bringing up instruction 2.3. Members of the jury, when the parties agree that certain facts are true, that is called a stipulation of fact. You must accept stipulated facts as having been proven. However, the significance of these facts, as with all facts, is for you to decide. In this case, the stipulated facts that you must accept are true are: the Markel children were enrolled at Creative Preschool located in Tallahassee. During the week of July 14th, 2024, their drop-off pickup schedule was as follows. Monday, July 14th, 2024, dropped off at 8:55 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 5 p.m. by Dan Markel. Tuesday, July 15th, 2014, dropped off at 8:25 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 4:50 p.m. by Dan Markel. Wednesday, July 16th, 2014, dropped off at 9 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 4:30 p.m. by Wendi Adelson. Thursday, July 17th, 2014, dropped off at 8:30 a.m. by Wendi Adelson, picked up at 4:45 p.m. by Dan Markel. Friday, July 18th, 2014, dropped off at 8:50 a.m. by Dan Markel.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I want to first focus your attention on the July 17, 2014 schedule. On July 17, 2014, as Your Honor just recited, do you recall dropping the kids off at school at 8:30 in the morning?
Yes.
And Professor Markel picked them up at 4:45 p.m. on that day, thereabouts.
Which I just heard, but I wouldn't have known what time.
You didn't pick them up that
I
day.
did. No, it wasn't my day.
So it would be impossible, the person would be wrong if they said that they saw you and the kids by Professor Markel's house in the afternoon or morning of July 17, 2014, correct?
It would be some other woman and some other kids.
You spoke to your mom probably close to daily, right?
Yeah,
During this time period. She would know when you had the kids and didn't have the kids, right?
probably.
Now I want to go back to something briefly that we talked about yesterday before we stopped. You knew that Professor Markel posted his travel plans on Facebook and on his prof's blog, right?
Yes,
He would talk about places and conferences that he was speaking at, right?
you would.
Are you aware that on the weekend of the 20th, he was supposed to speak at a conference in New Jersey, and he posted it on Prof's blog as well as on Facebook?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Best Buy. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's marked for identification purposes only as Defense Exhibit 29 and 30. Looking at Defense Exhibit 29, does that refresh your recollection that the warranty was under your father's name for
Yes.
that TV?
Mm-hmm.
A warranty with the Geek Squad?
Yes.
Now, before you look at Exhibit 20, do you recall that your mother scheduled the appointment for the TV to be fixed with this Geek Squad?
I remember that I scheduled it, but it looks like she scheduled it and gave me the number to call in case I needed to reschedule it.
And in fact, she emailed you on July 11th and told you if you can't keep the appointment on the 18th, call this number to reschedule it, right?
Yes.
You can put that aside. I want to talk a little bit more about July 18th. Do you recall leaving your house that day on Aqua Ridge Ray around 12:30 in the afternoon?
I do.
And you were going to meet a friend for lunch at a place called Mosaic.
Yes.
But you had to pick up a bottle of, I don't know if it's bourbon or whiskey. I don't even know if they're the same thing, but Bullet whiskey.
It was bourbon.
Okay. It was for your friend's wedding shower that night?
They were having a stock the bar party, so they asked for specific kinds of alcohol to stock the bar.
And I'm showing you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 32. Is this the invitation that you received?
Yes, that's it.
Judge, I would move Defense Exhibit 32 into evidence at this point in time.
An objection.
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Exception.
State of mind.
You can provide me with the exhibit.
I'm going to show right-hand corner. I'm going to show the right-hand corner.
The objection is sustained. She may testify as to remember.
Do you recall on the left-hand corner of the invitation, it says, help the bride and groom stock the bar for their wedding and bring a bottle of Bullet bourbon? Do you recall that?
Yes.
You can put that aside. Now, you decided to go to ABC Liquors on Bedden Road to look for the bourbon, right?
I did.
Okay. You're not a big drinker, is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
You went to that store because you were familiar with it?
I'd seen it close to my house, so
Close to your old house?
close to my old house.
There could have been liquor stores that were closer to your current house?
Sure.
Now, when you drove to ABC Liquor, you tried to go through Trescott. Is
I
that
did.
fair to say?
It was blocked.
There are other ways to go to ABC Liquor, right? You could have gone down other roads.
I don't have the best sense of direction, so when I find a route, I just kind of keep using that route. I don't look for something else.
Okay. You got to Mosaic at around 1 p.m.,
That sounds right.
and your lunch was interrupted by Investigator Isom, who told you that something had happened.
That's right.
You went with him voluntarily to
I
speak
did.
with him? You let police search your car?
Yes.
You were interviewed with the investigator from approximately 2:45 p.m. until 7:50 p.m.?
Yes.
He told you that your ex-husband had been shot and was unlikely to survive, right?
Yes.
You were in shock.
Yes.
You were pretty open with police, telling them a lot of things, right?
They kept telling me they needed my help, and so I kept trying to help.
Now, you remember on direct, Ms. Kappelman asked you about this interview.
Yes.
And she asked you about all the people you mentioned during the interview, including Charlie.
Yes.
And you said I was just wheeling off names, right?
Yes.
In fact, isn't the first person in the interview that you mentioned was yourself?
Yes.
You said that you would understand if you were viewed as the prime suspect, right?
Yes.
Before you mentioned anyone else, you mentioned yourself.
Yes.
You told them about the motion to relocate.
I did.
You told them about the fight you had with Professor Markel that very morning about some swimming for the boys.
Yes.
You were spitting out a lot of ideas.
I was.
And you agreed to let the police search your phone.
Yes.
You agreed to let the police search your car.
Yes.
That's where they found that picture that I wasn't able to admit of the invitation of the bowl of bourbon, right?
Yeah.
You agreed to be fingerprinted.
Yes.
You agreed to be checked for gunshot residue.
Yes.
You gave them your computer to be searched.
I did.
Towards the end of your interview, you asked the police officer if you could call your parents, right?
I did.
And the police allowed you to do that.
Yes.
And you called your mother's cell phone sometime around 7:04 p.m.
Yes.
And you spoke to your mom. I don't know if you remember, but you remember your dad being in the shower because they were going out to dinner.
I don't remember.
Your mom didn't answer actually the first call, and you called back a couple minutes later and she answered. Do you recall that?
I don't.
And when you called your mom, she was surprised.
Yes.
And you asked her to call Charlie and tell him what happened, right?
Yes.
You didn't speak with Charlie that day, right?
I don't think so.
On July 19th, the next day, you spoke to Charlie at 10:50 in the morning. Is that, you won't know the exact time, but do you recall speaking with him in the morning?
I honestly don't.
Do you recall letting him know that Professor Markel had passed away in the early morning?
I don't remember the conversation.
When your parents came directly to Tallahassee, correct?
They did.
They stopped in Orlando and they got there on the morning of the 19th, right?
Yes.
And when they got there, they were scared and frantic, right?
Yes.
Your dad didn't sleep. He couldn't get police protection, so he planted his chair in the front of your window to make sure that no one was going to come to your house and shoot it up, right?
Correct.
Now, you all attended a memorial service on the 20th, right?
Yes.
And you arranged for the Markels to see the boys after the memorial service, right?
They all came over my house.
And you left Tallahassee, correct?
Not on the 20th. No.
On the 21st.
Yes.
And when you left Tallahassee on the 21st, did you bring all your belongings?
I brought some swimsuits for the boys and some pajamas, and I thought we'd be back in a day or two.
And when you left, you were not yourself.
I was a mess.
You got to South Florida and you realized that you could not take care of the boys alone at this point in time.
I hadn't slept in days, and I was terrified.
To get a little more specific, you wouldn't leave the house.
No,
And you would hardly eat.
I wasn't eating, no.
And ultimately, you decided not to come back to Tallahassee.
I mean, I made that decision much later, but
And you had a friend who you grew up with, I think last name Keener, go back and get more stuff at your house, right?
he did.
You have one more moment, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Now, it's been said in this courtroom that you have tried to erase Professor Markel's memory from your boy's life. Is that true?
It's not true.
For the first 2 years after the murder, did you limit Professor Markel's family from seeing the boys?
Absolutely not.
In fact, they had complete access to the boys, right?
100%.
They made dinners with the boys.
I cooked dinner for them, yes, every time they visited.
There were sleepovers and playdates.
That's right.
There was no animosity at all, right?
No?
And then in October of 2016, things changed, right?
Yes.
A letter was released where there was a suggestion that Professor Markel's mom was talking to the state about arranging custody for the boys in case you got arrested.
Yes.
And you saw that as a betrayal.
Well, the custody was foster care, so yes.
You saw that as her thinking that you killed her son.
Yes.
And as a result of that, rightly or wrongly, you decided to limit their access.
I was afraid they were going to put my children in foster care.
Do your children know anything about their father?
They know a lot about their dad.
Do they have a picture of him in their bedroom?
Each boy has a picture of them and their dad over their bed that we say good morning to and good night to every day.
Did you benefit from Professor Markel's death?
No.
Well, you got to live in South Florida.
It's not a benefit.
How are your boys doing?
They're doing very well, thank you.
How has your job prospects been since this case hit the news?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
How are you doing?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Has this affected your life negatively or positively?
Negatively.
Does Charlie love his nephews?
Very much.
May I have one moment, Your Honor? Thank you, Ms. Adelson. I have no further questions.
Redirect examination.
The biggest mystery about Wendi at her brother's trial was whether Wendi was going to use the same dress for a third time, since she used the same dress at the first trial in 2019 and again at the second trial in 2022. But for Mentor Lawyer, the biggest mystery was how Charles Adelson's lawyer, Dan Rashbaum, would handle the cross-examination of Wendi in light of the fantastical story Dan Rashbaum offered during opening statements, where Dan Rashbaum first revealed to the world that supposedly his client, Charles Adelson, was also a victim of the people who killed Dan Markel, that those people shot Dan Markel of their own volition and then extorted Charles Adelson, seeking payment for the murder and to avoid also becoming a murder victim. Would Wendi know anything about this extortion? How would she react to the fact that she learned, with everyone else, that Charles knew who had killed Dan Markel long ago, but never told her or his children? Would she help her brother, and how? In the end, there was no fiery cross-examination. Instead, attorney Dan Rashbaum used the cross-examination as an opportunity to build pieces of evidence to support the silly argument that Wendi was not involved because, prior to the murder, she had been making plans as if she would still be living in Tallahassee after July 18, 2014. Dan Rashbaum also used the cross of Wendi to try to ridicule some of the state's evidence and to try to minimize the impact of other evidence. By closing arguments, we understood his strategy fully. Dan Rashbaum was going to argue that Professor Lacasse was a jilted and jealous ex-boyfriend with a motive to lie in a murder case to get back at Wendi. He was going to argue that Wendi was not good with directions and thus went to the ABC liquor store near where she lived with Dan Markel because she was bad with directions and felt more comfortable going to a store in a location she was familiar with. Dan Rashbaum was also going to argue that the state's supposed evidence of Wendi's involvement was all misinterpreted and exaggerated. All of these weak arguments fell flat with the jury. They were all rejected as the jury reached a guilty verdict against Charles Adelson in just a few hours. Indeed, if you recall from our recent interview with a juror from Katherine Magbanua's first trial, that juror mentioned that no one on the jury panel found Wendi Adelson believable, as her testimony felt rehearsed and disingenuous. No juror from the most recent trial has talked to the media about the deliberations in the Charles Adelson case. However, Mentor Lawyer would not be surprised if the jurors in Charles's trial had a similar impression of Wendi as did the juror he interviewed from the first trial. So what did you think about Dan Rashbaum's cross-examinations of Wendi Adelson? Thanks so much for watching Mentor Lawyer and Ladybug.